Hey there, folks. Before we dive into this wild story, let me ask you something. Have you ever met someone who judged you before they even knew you? Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from today. Oh, and if you love stories where bullies get what's coming, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. It was a bright, sunny Saturday morning in a little town called Maple Grove. The birds chirped, kids rode their bikes, and everything seemed calm and happy. Sarah Thompson drove her old pickup truck down the street, the engine making a soft, rattling sound. Her truck wasn't shiny or new. It had a few dents and scratches, but it got her where she needed to go. She turned into her driveway, parked, and stepped out, her boots crunching on the gravel. Sarah looked like any other person in the neighborhood. She wore a plain blue shirt, jeans, and a baseball cap. She smiled at a kid riding by and waved at an old man watering his flowers. To everyone around, Sarah was just the new lady who moved in a few months ago. She seemed nice, kept her yard tidy, and never made a fuss. But here's the thing, nobody knew who Sarah really was. She had a secret, a big one, and it was something that could shake up this quiet little town like a thunderstorm on a clear day. Maple Grove was a cozy place. The houses were neat, with green lawns and colorful mailboxes. Kids played in the streets and neighbors chatted over fences. But there was one group that made sure everything stayed perfect. The Maple Grove Homeowners Association, or HOA for short. The HOA had rules for everything. Your grass couldn't be too tall. Your fence had to be the right height. Even your mailbox had to be a certain color. Most people in the HOA were friendly. They wanted the neighborhood to look nice and they worked together to make it happen. But one person wasn't like the rest. Her name was Karen Miller, and she acted like she owned the whole town. Karen was the boss of the HOA, and she loved being in charge. She walked around the neighborhood with a clipboard in her hand, her eyes sharp like a hawk's. If she saw something she didn't like, she'd point at it and start talking loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your grass is too long," she'd say, or "that mailbox is the wrong shade of blue." Nobody argued with Karen. If your garbage can was out an hour too early, she'd write you a note. If your dog barked once, she'd knock on your door. Karen had a way of making people feel small, like they'd done something wrong even when they hadn't. She wore bright red lipstick and fancy sunglasses, and she'd strut down the street like she was the queen of Maple Grove. Most folks just sighed and followed her rules. They didn't want trouble, but trouble was coming and Karen had no idea. Sarah, the new lady, tried to fit in. She read the HOA rulebook from cover to cover. She painted her front door the exact shade of blue the rules allowed. She mowed her lawn every Saturday, even when she was tired from work. She made sure her trash cans were out only on pickup day. Sarah didn't want to stand out. She just wanted to live her life and enjoy her new home. Her house wasn't big or fancy. It was a small, cozy place with a tiny porch and a few flowers by the steps. Sarah liked it that way. She didn't need much to be happy, but Karen didn't care about that. From the moment Sarah moved in, Karen decided she didn't like her. It started small. One day Sarah was watering her flowers when Karen marched over, her clipboard tucked under her arm. "That truck," Karen said, pointing at Sarah's pickup, "it's ugly. It makes the whole street look bad." Sarah looked up, wiping sweat from her forehead. She smiled politely. "It's just my truck," she said. "It runs fine." Karen huffed, like Sarah had said something rude. "This isn't a junkyard," she snapped, then turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the sidewalk. Sarah watched her go, her smile fading just a little. She didn't say anything back, but something in her eyes showed she wasn't scared, not one bit. The neighbors noticed Karen picking on Sarah, but they didn't do much. Some felt bad, but they were too afraid to speak up. Karen had been running the HOA for years, and she knew how to make people listen. If you crossed her, you'd get a fine or she'd spread gossip about you. Nobody wanted that, so they kept quiet, even when Karen got meaner. One morning, Sarah found a note taped to her door. It was from Karen, written in big angry letters. "Your driveway has cracks. Fix it or you'll pay a fine." Sarah read the note, her fingers tightening on the paper. She didn't have extra money to fix a driveway. She worked long hours and barely had enough for bills. But Karen didn't care about that. To her, Sarah was just someone to boss around. Sarah's truck was Karen's favorite thing to complain about. Every time Sarah parked it in her driveway, Karen would glare from across the street. "That thing's a mess," she'd mutter to anyone who'd listen. "Why can't she get a real car?" The neighbors would nod, not because they agreed, but because they didn't want Karen yelling at them next. Sarah heard the whispers, but she didn't let it bother her. She'd climb into her truck, start the engine, and drive off like nothing was wrong. But deep down, she was paying attention. She noticed how Karen acted like she was better than everyone else. She saw how Karen broke her own rules, like parking her shiny car on the street when the HOA said not to. Sarah didn't say a word about it, but she was keeping track. Maple Grove wasn't a bad place to live. Most people were kind. There was Mr. Jenkins, who grew the best tomatoes and shared them with everyone. There was Jenny, a mom who baked cookies for the kids on Halloween. Even the HOA wasn't all bad. It helped keep the streets clean and the parks safe. But Karen made it hard to enjoy. She'd show up at your house with a fake smile, then point out something wrong with your yard. "Your flowers are too bright," she told one lady. "Your fence is half an inch too tall," she told a man. Nobody could please her, but Sarah got the worst of it. Karen seemed to think Sarah didn't belong, like she wasn't good enough for Maple Grove. Sarah didn't talk much about herself. When neighbors asked where she worked, she'd just say, "Oh, I keep busy." If they asked where she was from, she'd smile and change the subject. She wasn't rude, she was friendly enough, but she didn't share much. That made some people curious. Who was this quiet lady with the old truck? Why did she move to Maple Grove? A few neighbors tried to guess. Maybe she was a teacher, or maybe she worked at the store downtown. Nobody thought she was anything special. And that's exactly how Sarah wanted it. Her secret was safe, locked away like a treasure nobody could find. But secrets don't stay hidden forever, and Sarah was about to come out in a way nobody expected. One afternoon, Sarah was raking leaves in her yard when Karen drove by, her car windows down. "You missed a spot," Karen called out, pointing at a single leaf on the grass. Sarah looked up, her rake still in her hands. She didn't say anything, just waved and went back to work. Karen laughed like she'd won something and sped off. But Sarah wasn't upset. She raked her leaves, humming a little tune. She wasn't thinking about Karen's words. She was thinking about something else, something big. Karen thought she was in control, but she didn't know Sarah at all. Every mean comment, every note, every glare was building up to something. And when the truth came out, it would hit like a lightning bolt. The neighborhood kept going like always. Kids played, dogs barked, and the sun set behind the trees. Sarah's house stayed neat, her truck stayed parked, and she stayed quiet. But there was a spark in her, a fire waiting for the right moment. Karen thought she could push Sarah around forever. She thought Sarah was just a nobody, someone who'd bow down and follow orders. Oh, how wrong she was. Sarah wasn't just the new lady. She was something else, something Karen never saw coming. And soon, everyone in Maple Grove would know it. Sarah Thompson really wanted to be a good neighbor in Maple Grove. She tried hard to follow all the rules of the Homeowners Association, or HOA. She painted her front door the exact shade of blue the rulebook said was okay. She mowed her lawn every week, even when her arms were tired. She made sure her trash cans were out only on the right day. Sarah didn't want any trouble. She just wanted to live in her little house and feel at home. But one person made that really hard: Karen Miller. Karen was the boss of the HOA, and she acted like she was in charge of everything. From the very first day Sarah moved in, Karen decided she didn't like her. One sunny morning, Sarah was unloading groceries from her old pickup truck. Karen marched over, her red lipstick shining and her eyes narrow. "Your truck is an eyesore," she snapped, her voice so loud the whole street could hear. "This isn't a junkyard, you know." Sarah looked up, a bag of apples in her arms. She didn't yell back or get mad. Instead, she smiled politely. "I'll keep that in mind," she said, her voice calm. But inside, Sarah wasn't calm. Karen's words weren't just mean, they felt like a punch. Sarah loved her truck. It wasn't new or fancy, but it was hers. It got her to work, to the store, and back home. Why did Karen care so much? Sarah didn't say it out loud, but she was starting to keep track of every mean thing Karen did. Karen didn't stop with the truck. Every time Sarah parked in her driveway, Karen would stand across the street and glare. Her arms would be crossed and her lips would be tight, like she was angry just because Sarah existed. One day, Sarah planted some pretty yellow flowers by her porch. She thought they looked cheerful, but Karen showed up with her clipboard, shaking her head. "Those flowers are too bright," she said, like it was a crime. "They don't match the neighborhood." Sarah blinked. "Too bright." "They were just flowers," but she nodded and said, "Okay, I'll think about it." Karen walked away, her heels clicking, acting like she'd won something. The neighbors saw all this, but they didn't do much. They'd whisper to each other when Karen wasn't around. "She's so bossy," one lady said. "Why does she pick on Sarah?" a man asked, but nobody spoke up. Karen had been in charge of the HOA for years, and she knew how to scare people. If you argued with her, she'd give you a fine or talk bad about you to everyone. So the neighbors stayed quiet, even when Karen got meaner. They felt bad for Sarah, but they were afraid to get in Karen's way. One afternoon, Sarah came home from work and found a note taped to her front door. It was written in big, angry letters, and it was from Karen. "Fix your driveway cracks or face a fine," it said. Sarah stood there holding the note, her jaw tight. She looked at her driveway. Sure, it had a few cracks, but they weren't a big deal. Fixing them would cost a lot of money, and Sarah didn't have extra cash lying around. Her house was small, her truck was old, and she worked long hours to pay her bills. She wasn't rich, and Karen knew that, but Karen didn't care. To her, Sarah was just someone to boss around. Sarah read the note again, and something inside her changed. It was like a tiny spark lit up in her heart. She wasn't mad, not yet, but she was tired of Karen's games. Sarah wasn't the kind of person to give up or run away. She folded the note and put it in her pocket. She didn't know what she'd do yet, but she knew one thing for sure: Karen wasn't going to win forever. Karen kept finding new ways to pick on Sarah. One day, Sarah hung a small birdhouse in her tree. It was cute, painted red to match her mailbox. Karen saw it and stomped over. "That birdhouse isn't allowed," she said, pointing like it was a monster. "Take it down by tomorrow or I'll report you." Sarah looked at the birdhouse, then at Karen. "I checked the rules," she said quietly. "It's fine." Karen's face turned red. She wasn't used to anyone talking back even a little. She huffed and walked off, muttering about troublemakers. Another time, Sarah was sweeping her porch when Karen drove by in her shiny car. "Your porch light is too dim," Karen yelled out her window. "Fix it." Sarah kept sweeping, not even looking up. The light was fine, it worked every night. But Karen just wanted to complain. It was like she couldn't stand seeing Sarah happy or comfortable. Every little thing Sarah did, Karen had something mean to say. The neighbors started to notice how unfair it was. One lady, Mrs. Carter, brought Sarah some cookies one day. "Don't let Karen get to you," she said softly. "She's like that with everyone." Sarah smiled and thanked her, but she didn't say much. She didn't need to. She was watching Karen, paying attention to every word, every glare, every note. Karen thought she was in control, but Sarah was smart. She wasn't going to fight back with yells or arguments. She had a better plan, even if nobody knew it yet. Karen's mean tricks made Sarah's life harder, but they also made her stronger. Every time Karen snapped at her, Sarah stood a little taller. Every time Karen left a note, Sarah's spark grew a little brighter. She wasn't ready to show her cards yet, but she was getting closer. Karen thought Sarah was weak, someone who'd just take it and stay quiet, but Karen was wrong. Sarah wasn't weak at all. She was waiting, and when the time was right, Karen would find out just how wrong she'd been. Have you ever dealt with someone like Karen? What would you do in Sarah's shoes? Tell me below. Time went by in Maple Grove and things got tougher for Sarah Thompson. Karen Miller, the HOA boss, didn't let up. Her mean tricks grew bigger and bolder, like a storm getting worse. One morning at 7 a.m., Karen banged on Sarah's door so loud it woke her up. Sarah opened the door, still in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Your trash cans are unapproved," Karen yelled, pointing at the cans by the curb. "They're not the right color." Sarah looked at the cans. They were plain gray, just like everyone else. She tilted her head, confused. "I got them from the store, the HOA told me to," she said softly. Karen didn't care. She crossed her arms and huffed. "Change them or you'll get a fine," she snapped, then stormed off, her clipboard swinging. Sarah shut the door and sighed. She wasn't mad, but she was tired of Karen's nonsense. It wasn't just the trash cans. Karen found new things to complain about every day. One afternoon, Sarah got an email from the HOA. It was sent to everyone in the neighborhood and it called Sarah's house a disgrace. Karen had written it, saying Sarah's yard was messy and her truck was ugly. Sarah read the email, her fingers tight on her phone. Her yard wasn't messy. She mowed it every week. Her truck was old, sure, but it was parked neatly in her driveway. Karen was just trying to make her look bad. The neighbors saw the email too, but nobody said anything to Karen. They were too scared. Sarah didn't yell or fight back. She stayed quiet, but that didn't mean she was weak. Oh no, Sarah was smart. She watched Karen like a hawk watches a field. She started noticing things, little things that Karen probably thought nobody saw. For one, Karen never parked her shiny car in her own driveway. The HOA rules said everyone had to park in their driveway or garage, but Karen left her car on the street every night. Sarah saw it every time she walked by. Another thing, Karen's little dog barked all night long, waking up half the neighborhood. But when anyone complained about barking, Karen blamed other dogs. "It's not my precious," she'd say, acting all innocent. Sarah heard it all and she kept a list in her head. Every rule Karen broke, every mean word she said, Sarah remembered. One evening, Sarah came home from a long day at work. The sun was setting and the sky was pink and orange. She pulled into her driveway, her truck rattling as it stopped. She got out, ready to relax, but then she froze. Her mailbox, her nice red mailbox, was covered in ugly spray paint. Big sloppy letters spelled out trash across it. Sarah's heart started pounding. She looked around. Some neighbors were peeking out their windows, their curtains twitching. Across the street, Karen stood on her porch, watching. Her arms were crossed and she had a smirk on her face like she was proud of something. Nobody said a word. Nobody came out to help. Sarah could have been furious. She could have marched over to Karen and yelled. She could have called the police right then and there, but she didn't. Instead, she took a deep breath and walked to her garage. She grabbed a sponge and a bucket of soapy water, then went back to the mailbox. She started scrubbing, the paint coming off slowly. As she worked, she hummed a little song like nothing was wrong. The neighbors watched, surprised. Karen watched too, her smirk fading just a bit. She probably thought Sarah would cry or give up, but Sarah didn't. She kept scrubbing until the mailbox was clean again, then carried her bucket inside without a single word. That night, Sarah sat in her kitchen thinking. The mailbox wasn't just a prank, it was personal. Karen wanted to make her feel small, like she didn't belong in Maple Grove, but Sarah wasn't going anywhere. She wasn't the kind of person to run away from a bully. She was waiting for the right moment, and every mean thing Karen did brought that moment closer. Sarah didn't need to shout or make a scene. She had a plan, even if nobody else could see it yet. The next day, Karen was back at it. She knocked on Sarah's door holding a new note. "Your fence is leaning," she said, pointing at Sarah's little wooden fence. Sarah looked outside. The fence was fine, straight as an arrow. "It's not leaning," she said calmly. Karen's face got red. "I say it is," she barked. "Fix it or I'll fine you." Sarah just nodded. "I'll check it out," she said and closed the door. She wasn't going to argue, not yet. But she added fence to her mental list, right next to street parking and barking dog. Karen's tricks didn't stop. One morning, Sarah found her flower pots turned over, dirt spilled all over her porch. Another day, Karen taped a sign to Sarah's truck that said, "Junk." Each time, Sarah cleaned up the mess without complaining. She sweep the dirt, peel off the sign, and go about her day. The neighbors started to talk more. "Karen's going too far," one man whispered to his wife. "Sarah doesn't deserve this," said a lady who lived next door, but they still didn't stand up to Karen. They were afraid she'd turn on them next. Sarah saw their fear, but she didn't blame them. She knew how bullies worked. Karen thought she could push everyone around forever. But Sarah was different. She wasn't scared, even if she didn't show it. Every time Karen did something mean, Sarah got a little stronger. She kept watching, kept waiting. Karen's smirk, her loud voice, her clipboard, they didn't fool Sarah. She knew Karen was breaking rules and acting like a hypocrite. And she knew something else. Karen had no idea who she was really messing with. One afternoon, Sarah was raking leaves when Karen drove by. "Your tree's too tall," Karen shouted out her car window. Sarah paused, her rake in her hands. The tree was the same as every other tree on the street. She waved politely and went back to raking. Karen laughed, thinking she'd won again, but Sarah wasn't thinking about the tree. She was thinking about everything else, every note, every insult, every dirty trick. The list in her head was getting long and the spark in her heart was growing brighter. Karen thought she was in charge, but she was wrong. Something big was coming and Sarah was ready. What do you think Sarah's planning? Would you stay calm or lose your cool? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Everything in Maple Grove came to a big, wild moment one Friday night. The air was cool and the stars were starting to peek out in the dark sky. Sarah Thompson was at her little house, unloading groceries from her old pickup truck. She carried a bag of apples in one arm and some bread in the other, humming softly to herself. Her truck was parked in the driveway, same as always, with its dents and scratches catching the glow of her porch light. Sarah was tired from a long week, but she felt okay. She was ready to go inside, make some dinner, and relax. But then, out of nowhere, a loud crash broke the quiet. Sarah froze, her heart jumped in her chest. She turned and saw sparkling bits of glass all over the ground. The windshield of her truck was smashed, with a big hole right in the middle. A rough, jagged rock sat on the hood like it had been thrown with all someone's strength. Sarah's eyes went wide. She set her groceries down on the grass and stepped closer, her boots crunching on the broken glass. That's when she saw her, Karen Miller, standing just a few feet away by the sidewalk. Karen had her arms crossed tight, her red lipstick shining in the dim light. She looked at Sarah with a mean, sharp smile. "Maybe now you'll listen," she hissed, her voice low and nasty. "Get that junker out of here." She pointed at Sarah's truck like it was the worst thing in the world. Sarah stared at her, not moving. The air felt heavy, like a storm was about to break. Karen's words weren't just rude, they were a challenge, a dare. She thought she could do anything and get away with it. Across the street, neighbors peeked out from behind their blinds. Curtains twitched and soft gasps came from open windows. They'd heard the crash and now they were watching, waiting to see what would happen. Nobody came outside, though. They were too nervous, too used to Karen being the boss. Karen stood there, her chin up, acting like she owned the whole neighborhood. She thought Sarah would back down, just like everyone else always did. But Sarah wasn't like everyone else. She took a slow step forward, her boots crunching louder on the glass. She looked right into Karen's eyes, not blinking, not scared. Her face was calm, but there was a fire in her gaze. "You just made a big mistake," she said, her voice steady and clear. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the night like a knife. Karen laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "Oh, please," she said, rolling her eyes. "Who's gonna stop me, you?" She said "you" like it was a joke, like Sarah was nobody important. The neighbors held their breath. A dog barked somewhere down the street, but everything else was quiet. Karen's laugh hung in the air, but Sarah didn't flinch. She didn't yell or get mad. Instead, she reached into her pocket, slow and sure, like she'd been waiting for this moment all along. Her fingers pulled out something small and shiny. She held it up and the porch light caught it, making it gleam. It was a badge, not just any badge, but one with a bright gold star in the center. The crowd went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Karen's laugh stopped like someone had flipped a switch. Her eyes got big and her mouth fell open. The smirk on her face melted away, replaced by a look of pure shock. Sarah held the badge steady, letting everyone see it. Then she spoke, her voice strong but calm. "I'm Chief Sarah Thompson," she said, "Maple Grove Police Department, and you, Karen, are under arrest for vandalism." Karen's jaw dropped so far it looked like it might hit the ground. She stammered, her words tripping over each other. You're not, you can't be," she squeaked, her voice high and shaky. She took a step back, her arms uncrossing, her hands flapping like she didn't know what to do. But Sarah didn't waver. She slipped the badge back into her pocket and pulled out a small radio from her belt. "Officer Daniels, this is Chief Thompson," she said into it, her voice as steady as a rock. "I need backup at my address. Suspect in custody for property damage." Karen's face turned white. She shook her head, her fancy sunglasses sliding down her nose. "This is a mistake," she cried. "You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president." But Sarah just looked at her, one eyebrow raised, like she'd heard it all before. The neighbors couldn't stay inside anymore. Doors creaked open and people stepped onto their lawns, whispering to each other. "Did she say chief?" one man asked. "Sarah's a cop," said a lady, her eyes wide. Nobody had known. Not one person in Maple Grove had guessed that Sarah, the quiet new neighbor with the old truck, was the top police officer in town.